How curious are you? Are you curious like a cute little kitty cat? I've actually talked about how cats are like ancient Chinese Taoist masters. Taoist is like a philosophy from China. And a lot of people actually like that video because, has to do with cats. And I don't blame them because cats are pretty darn awesome. I mean, I have a cat, so maybe I'm a little biased. And some of you guys with dogs are going to be like, oh, dogs are better. And, cats versus dogs, it's like a big feud apparently. But either way, if you're curious like the kitty cat, then this video is for you because we're going to do an analysis on pretension, on fakery, on an honest reality, and getting more clear on what that real reality is. Because as we move into the world of AI and technology, in a world of uncertainty, you should be getting pretty curious. You should be like, what is this going to do to us? And also, what is this like AI technology? Like, this stuff is crazy. And also, like, what is this reality we live in? Like, we still haven't even figured out the Earth, and let alone our own creations. Like, what's going on here? Like, did aliens build the pyramids? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is the type of thing. If you're truly curious, you're gonna be asking these questions. So let's get into it. The curious mind will run into every scenario, prompting as many questions. One tree, a million observations. A thought that may be thought to be old, but nonetheless a thought, regardless of time. There is, too, a person thought to be anew in this world, but they are a person, regardless of time. Our love, our emotion, our instinct, our ability to think, to reflect and create, these are regardless of time. And may we add, they are regardless of any condition or presupposing. We have the habit of telling ourselves or others what's natural or not, and this is so often due to pretension or disease, the disruption of balance or of harmony, of the way or of virtue. Yet, I may say that the natural is the honest, and that doesn't mean that you're right. Or I may say that the honest is timeless, but that doesn't mean that we follow or do the timeless. Just as some problems are to exist, so are our expectations. And yet, as these are recognized, so comes our pretension. This is because we make greater problems out of lesser problems by our dwelling, and we expect that of which may be unrealistic. But in each case, we attach the subjective mind to reality. We make ourselves the authority of nature. When the very idea of any natural problem, any realistic expectation, relies on the idea that there is a natural authority that makes it so. In other words, that truth makes it so, that it simply is reason or reality entrained over time as common sense and conscience. Now, what follows this training, if it is not pretentious, it is not forced, it must be flowing, it must be harmony. Some training easier than others, depending on the pretension. So, to recap, okay, because you might be a little confused, I'm using a lot of poetical language, as I admit. Well, if you're curious, you will probably look over these words and be like, what do they mean? And if you're truly curious, you're going to look at these words and actually start to understand what they mean. Because how far are you willing to question? But even then, some problems that we recognize are problems, we may end up creating problems that don't exist. And that's what we got to be careful of. The overthinker, the person who's stepping too far outside their boundaries. And when I talk about this idea of natural authority or authority within nature, what I'm emphasizing is that idea of don't try to control everything. Don't try to be right. Don't try to necessarily be curious. There is such a thing as being a kid and naturally curious, or being a kitty cat and being naturally curious. But there is also a thing such as, well, let's try to be curious. Let's try to be good. You shouldn't have to try, and that's what I'm getting at. So there is this training we have to do to better ourselves, but we can't fake the training. We can't be like, hey guys, I'm training, and yeah, I'm doing it because I don't want to actually feel better myself. I'm doing it because I want views or because I want somebody to boost my ego. See, by one view, it's like, yeah, this person's bettering their health, but another view, it's like, no, they're actually doing this because they want to put on a show. They want to do something other than just for their health. Now, you could say it's also for both, right? But really, where should that be? Should they be doing something they don't want to do just to impress some other people? This is the types of questions that, if you're truly curious about, we don't want to be contradictive with our actions in our life. I would hope you would agree with that. So some training is easier than others depending on the pretension. If you think of it as the lessening of tension, the ease of the seas, the heal and health, this is merely the role of what we call the natural in nature. We wouldn't call something natural unless there was something that wasn't natural. We wouldn't be talking about health unless we were diseased and we don't have health currently. So it isn't a term to be feared, nor gratified, this word natural. It is simply to speak of reality, what is then gratified in regards to illusion. Like we gratify and look toward nature as a sense of good because we feel like we're in a man-made world with a lot of man-made things. And so good is seen in light of bad because naturality is morality. Nature is morality. Nature gives us consequences. Nature must be obeyed. But since the subjective, our opinion, our whim, is cast away in such very proceeding, our concept of good or natural is not fixated, despite how nature itself is fixated. But we don't abandon life just because we can't breathe for a moment. We don't abandon looking for food just because we go hungry for a moment. What we need, we search for, we study. It's a journey that could be enjoyed and entertained. We don't abandon our pursuits of morals and what is right just because we can't specifically define what is right under every single case scenario. But a lot of people expect you to say, well, what is right for everything? It's like, well, can we really do that? We can come up with a lot of complex moral frameworks, but even then, it's like we can't really make a definite definition that applies to everything with no exception. It can be rather difficult, which is why I talk a lot about a voluntary world and respecting others' opinions and allowing each other to have different views. That's how you have unity. And accepting division? Exactly. It's such quite an irony, but it's so powerful to see. Only a curious mind can figure that out because they see the world from a holistic, bigger picture. And so, this concept of obeying nature has been turned into other forms as well. And how are we sure it's not pretentious? How are we sure somebody is not just saying something's natural when it's not actually natural? And you see this a lot in the supermarket. This is natural, this is healthy. It's like, is it really? So some say it's a struggle and that nature is brutal and destructive. But yet, if we acknowledge that it's the reality ever present, who are we to speak of this destruction when we cannot conceive of any other reality, and our actions and our limited knowledge are our own fault? Do you blame nature for your lack of knowledge which your fellow humankind may teach you, or you may teach yourself? Technology was a product of nature. That, however, means it owes allegiance, just as much as you do to nature. How could you complain to a world you cannot change? You may attempt to change it, and hence the pretension, but observe your effects and you will see that not everything is so programmable. Otherwise, laws of nature could be altered and still new laws are being discovered, right? Laws like thermodynamics and inertia, and people talk about gravity and density and these different things we study in science. We say these could be applied to everything because we observe it in everything within nature. And because of that, there is this staticness to nature, which makes it very appealing for us to want to create a moral framework, because we realize we can do this in other fields of science. So why can't we do it with morality? And I talk about this concept of a natural moral law here and there, so I do give some credence to that. But it is important to know that we can get so stuck on numbers and so stuck on definitions, and we have to realize that if you look at a tree, you look at nature, we're the ones kind of making all of this, okay? We're making it much more complicated than it is. There's tribes that live in nature, they're so one with nature, they don't have to study it and put everything under a microscope. They know how they feel. They know what to do, and they don't have all these big hospitals and all this medical equipment to help somebody. You ever think why that is? And you can say some of it is trial and error, yeah, but it's also just being in tune with how life works. And this is something I think as we move into the world of technology, we're losing a sense of, and I made a very high emphasis of this in my video on cats, because cats have this instinct within them that says, yes, I'm going to react to my environment accordingly. You can throw me off a cliff and I'm still going to stand on my feet. You know what I mean? Like, that's what the cat can do. It's amazing. And so when we think of obeying or laws, we come to the concept of government. But it's by its nature subjective, man-made. It instills a program for people to follow. It forces interactions for people. It tells them how to live their own life. It's not just people coming together. It's people saying, okay, this is how everyone else should live their life. And we're going to write it down with law, call it law, and it's going to be violence imposed on everyone. That's what law is. So these are not lasting in nature, nor tend to have a natural or supportive use for nature, nor naturally occur in nature without the programming. That's why you have schooling that introduces like, hey, this is the flag that you need to worship and pledge allegiance to, and this is the country you were born into, so you must obey it. It's like, well, did you really consent to it? You were kind of just born into the world, and they presume themselves to be natural, as if like you need to just obey that system. And so this illusion is accepted as reality after thousands of years. It's simply slavery by another word, and I've detailed this very deeply in my work, Slavery Gone for Good. Okay, and I have a rendition of this over 400 pages. It goes super deep into it, so be sure to reach out to me if you want that edition. The concept of authority is the very prime of what it means to respect nature moreover than man, and that's why it begs us of freedom. Real authority, if you say, well, something you have to obey, right? Not authority as in there's an authority in man. You don't have to obey man. They claim that you have to obey them, but they have to enforce it using violence. Nature, it's like you have no choice because there's laws that govern your behavior. You can't escape nature. You can escape a man, you know, some person millions of miles away, you don't know. But freedom, as to nature, requires knowledge and practicing. It is mastery because you become the master of yourself. Yet to then externalize this authority of nature to that of a god beyond nature, how could we separate the world we live in? If it interacts with us, if we are bound to it, we are one with it. To assume it's limited to some book, to some interpretation, to some historical event or figure, we would presume a great emphasis on the subjective when stopping there. In other words, think of authority as the concept of attachment. What are you attaching yourself to? Do you attach yourself to the worldly items to attain a higher understanding? Do you attach yourself to another person in order to know yourself? Do you attach yourself to the healing modalities of another person in order to heal yourself? As a bridge, a medium, people will seek these, but attachment implies dependence. In nature, you cannot escape. Religion, you can. And this is why you have so many different types of religions, and they all don't agree with each other because they have their own books and their own ideologies and their own set ways of doing things. And they presume a dependence and an attachment. So this is just something to bear in mind, which is why I'm not a religious individual, but I do consider myself spiritual for seeing those unseen aspects of reality, for observing natural laws, as you may call it, for observing the Taoist philosophy and understanding yin and yang, and understanding that, you know, what if possibilities. I'm not going to put a label on myself and say, I am this, I am that, I'm an atheist, I'm religious. I'm not going to do that because I'm still learning who I am. I'm still evolving in this world like everybody else is. I'm simply acknowledging the fact that I don't know or have all the answers. And this is something I think maybe we want to admit to more often than we do. So if we go back to what I said, nature you cannot escape, religion you can, think about it. Should you escape what claims to be the truth? Because if you're able to escape it, shouldn't you do it? Because then there's a truth beyond it. Therefore, when religion asks for you to obey, is it really? By what threat, if not nature itself, for which it claims to operate through? And if it operates through nature, then you need not attach to religion, but to nature. Similarly, if you recognize there is a greater meaning beyond words, that translations and interpretations are faulty, then you will not rely on them as the only source of truth or nature or connection. And if you recognize God's truth is ever present, look toward the forest and the environment which has been here all along. Most evident is the health effects. Look at the health benefits of meditation, and then you won't just say prayer is the only answer. This is just all to open up your mind. I'm not saying one way is the best. I'm not saying you should look at the world under the way I look at it and having more of a nature connection rather than through the Bible and other texts and mediums. You can use those, but I'm saying that if you can recognize there's something beyond it, then what value is to have something beyond it? What value is to have many different religions? Why do they exist? Are you going to say they're purely there just for deceit? Do they not have a purpose? Why do they believe that their truth is just as truthful as yours? And if you get curious and you ask yourself, well, what about people who can't read at all? What about those tribes in nature who are very connected to nature? They seem really happy. You'll start to realize, maybe I shouldn't be so dogmatic in my way of thinking, and that this is simply what works for me. But I'm not going to tell other people that's how they should live their life. This is the key, because a lot of people create a divide, and they'll even go to war with each other because they believe their view is better than everyone else. And so let me remind you, one tree can become a million observations, but also don't forget the tree. You can become someone, but don't forget you. Reality can become altered, but don't forget reality. Nature has sprung a many 10,000 things under its reign, but don't forget about nature. With practice, no need to remember, no need to think, you are one with nature. How then could life be more self-evident? This is the key. If our life, the way we live it, the way we think about the way we do things, is so in harmony with the way things are, in nature, according to its laws, according to how things operate according to God or whatever you follow, then it should be quite effortless. It shouldn't require too much strain. It shouldn't require force. But if it does require force and a lot of strain, then is it really truthful? Is it something that is built into the universe? These are just some questions for you. I'm very curious. I want you to be curious too. When we ask ourselves about the authority of governments, do we ever challenge the underlying authority? I'll put some questions on the screen for you. Think about it. Now, I'll just give you a whole list. Let's talk about growing food, permaculture, not talked about. Schooling. Where are the roots of schooling? The Prussian model of schooling, teaching you obedience as virtue. Let's look at health, ancestral living. We're not taught about that. And economics, Austrian economics, looking at the free market, ending division and dependence, and seeing how people can voluntarily interact as opposed to, oh, you must supply everything for me because I say so, because I have this privilege. And so there's different ways to approach the world, and I think we need to be open to each other's methods, but as long as we don't impose our methods on others using violence. And I would hope that most people would agree with that. Thank you very much for watching. This was an article written by myself for the Liberator 2 News. You can write an article, I'll turn to a video for you. Thank you for watching.